So I hope you enjoyed our study of Sodom and Gomorrah last week. This week in lesson 22, we'll pick up with the story of Abraham and his family now, following the complete destruction of Sodom, Lot living in caves in the mountains, and of course we had the two daughters, one who gave birth to the Moabites and one who gave birth to the Ammonites. The Ammonites becoming an enemy of Israel, and the Moabites would eventually provide the grandmother of David and eventually the lineage all the way up through Jesus. Would include a Moabitess woman. So this week we're going to begin now to take another look at Abraham, and we need to remember as a little background that when when God and the two angels came and spoke to Abraham, one of the things they talked about was Sarah was going to have the child that Abraham had long been promised. You'll remember back a couple of lessons, Abraham, when he is 86, has a child who is handmaiden, and that child is Ishmael. And now we are going to fast forward ahead 14 years. Ishmael is 14, and Isaac will be born to Abraham, who is 100. This is a year between that promise and his birth, and all of the things that happened, one of which, as we'll see, was the complete destruction of Sodom in that 1 year from when Sarah was told she would conceive until the actual birth of Isaac. And you'll remember Sarah laughed at them when they said she would conceive, and of course now we'll see that there's no laughing matter. So with that, I want to go ahead and let's take a look at chapter 20 of Genesis. And we ask the question, incredible as it might seem, we see Abraham and Sarah caught in a lie once again. Look at 20:11 here. God's, Abimelech is asking him why he lied. Abraham and his family pack up after the Sodom thing. They pack up and they move, and they lie to Abimelech that Sarah is his sister. Again, we see this. It's the second time he's done this. And Abimelech says to Abraham, what have you encountered to have done this thing? Why have you done this? And Abraham said, because I thought surely there is no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. So he thought he respects God and follower of God. These people are not, and he was afraid for his life to the point where he lied about Sarah. Now he just saw God bring judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah, but he was afraid for his own life. It's just amazing. I mean, Abraham, a great man of faith, but isn't this interesting that in this case, a weak moment, he lied again. And I said in question 2, lying appears to be a recurring theme, not only Abraham and Sarah, but the family as well. We observed when Abram and Sarai were in Egypt, and we see it here again, and we will encounter it again later with another Abimelech, and who lies that time. And we can go over to Genesis 26 for a minute. We're going to jump ahead a little bit here. And in Genesis 26, we're going to read 1 through 11. Now this is Isaac, who is going to be born in today's study. This is now, jump way ahead, and now Isaac's out on his own. And it says that now there was a famine in the land, beside the previous famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham. So Isaac went to Gerar, to Abimelech, king of the Philistines. So he's over there with those Philistines. And the Lord appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt. Stay in the land of which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. Now this is the Lord talking to him. For to you and to your descendants I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath which I swore to your father Abraham. I will multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven, and will give your descendants all these lands, and by your descendants all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. All the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed me and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So Isaac lived in Gerar. When the men of the place asked about his wife, he said, she is my sister, for he was afraid to say, my wife, thinking the men of this place might kill me on account of Rebekah, for she is beautiful. And it came about when he had been there a long time that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out through a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was caressing his wife Rebekah. Then Abimelech called Isaac and said, Behold, certainly she is your wife. How then did you say she is my sister? And Isaac said to him, Because I said I might die on account of her. And Abimelech said, What is this that you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. So Abimelech charged all the people, saying, He who touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. And so we see, and we'll see later, of course, we get Jacob and Esau coming in this line too. The lying, deceiving, deception kinds of things seem to run in the family. It's just fascinating to see that come up generation after generation. There is a question 3 says there's an interesting contrast between Abraham's intercession with God for Sodom and Gomorrah and Abimelech's question to God. How are they different? And the answer is that Abraham asked God not to destroy the two cities if at least 10 righteous people were found to be living in them, where Abimelech asked God if he would destroy an innocent nation. And then we go to Genesis 21 verses 21 1 to 7. And this is now the birth of Isaac. It says, Then the Lord took note of Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had promised. And that is another thing, too. If we have a promise from the Lord, we can count 100% on it. So Sarah conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the appointed time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, who Sarah bore to him, Isaac. Then Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. And it's interesting, I believe, that the 8-day number, I believe a child's blood will not clot until the 7th day, I believe. There's actually a medical reason for them in this day having waited till the 8th day. Today's circumcision is different. We have different kinds of medicine equipment and so on. But I believe back then that was why it was the 8th day, because the child would be able to heal from it. In any case, he was circumcised on the 8th day as God had commanded. Now Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. This would mean, by the way, then, we read last week that Abraham was 86 when Ishmael was born. So Ishmael's a teenager. He's 14 now, probably running around bow and arrow, learning how to hunt and so on. But so we got a teenager at home, born to, you might refer to her as a stepmother, born a handmaiden. And now we have a newborn in the house, Sarah's first child, at Abraham's tender age of 100. And in verse 6, Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh with me, referring back to when she originally laughed that she'd ever have a child at this age. With me. And she said, Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. And in verse 8 says, The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. And so from there, I asked the question, how much time has passed since the angel of the Lord visited Abraham, promised him he would have a son, at which Sarah laughed, and told him about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah? Well, it's approximately a year, 9 months to a year from the destruction until the current birth of Isaac. So it's been quite the years, you can well imagine. Not clear even that Abraham knows that Lot survived that destruction. You'll note, too, there's no indication that Abraham went down in there to see. That destruction would have been so violent, so broad-based, so destructive. I believe 400 or 600 years. There's a period of time that passes where the land is completely inhabitable. Nobody settles there. And it's at least 400 years, it may be 600. I'll learn while I'm out there digging. Dr. Collins has actually calculated it based on the layers that they're finding during the excavation. But a long period of unsettlement occurs during that period of time because of the destruction was so great. So that all occurred in that year leading up to Isaac's birth. Right. So in question 5 then, who gave Isaac his name, and what does it mean? And if we go to verse 3, Abraham gave him the name. We said Isaac. And in fact, what's interesting, is that it means he laughs, and this is what Sarah is talking about down below. So the child laughed, Sarah laughed as a result of the child. Laughter is kind of a theme with the birth of Isaac. You can just see it's a family starting all over again, and how happy and joyous all three of them would be. And I'm sure all of us know someone who at an older age than normal ended up having a child and was really celebrating about it because they thought that period of time had passed in their lives, and they had lost out on that, and now they had it. And so you can imagine Abraham and Sarah's joy at this new baby. Question 6, contrast the scene when the angels visited Abraham when he was up in front of his tent and so on, and the scene when they visited Lot, specifically with respect to where they each found them sitting. And we talked about this before in the previous lesson. They found Abraham sitting in the tent, opening the door of his tent, and they found Lot, of course, sitting in the gate of the city with all the influential people. But if we read 19 verse 1 again, we'll see, let me get over to 19 for you here. 19 verse 1, it says, the two angels came to Sodom in the evening. Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. And then if we look at 18, 1 and 2, we see that now the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre while he was sitting at his tent door. And so then we go to, again, it's the contrast of the two. And here's Abraham once again now following God and being given another promise. And this, of course, the birth of his son. So Abraham drives Hagar and Ishmael from the camp with only limited food and water. When the supplies run out, so I'm kind of ahead of myself a little bit. So the baby arrives on the scene. And, of course, one of the first thing that happens is Sarah wants the baby, the child Ishmael, the 14-year-old, and his mother, the handmaiden, expelled from the camp. And Abraham doesn't want to do it, but God tells him to go ahead and do it. And so the child and his mother are expelled. And question 7 says, so Abraham drives Hagar and Ishmael from the camp with only limited food and water. Gives them a small amount of food and water. And the supplies run out. Hagar distances herself from her teenage son by the distance of a bow shot. And I asked the question, why, in their hour of need, would Hagar want to distance herself from her son? And so let's look at 21 for a moment, the chapter 21. And we're in verses 15 and 16. Why would the mother want to run away when the child is suffering like that? And so we read in 15, when the water in the skin was used up, she, this is Hagar now, left the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him about a bow shot away, for she said, do not let me see the boy die. And she sat opposite him and lifted up her voice and wept. So she thought that her son was dying. She didn't want to watch him die, and so she's gone the other side of the bush, a bow shot away some distance, crying obviously and feeling that there was no hope. So then question 8 was, why would Abimelech, who was a native of the land and a king, ask Abraham, an alien in the land, to swear an oath to him? And Abimelech requested this because he saw that God was Abraham in everything that Abraham did. God was with Abraham. Abimelech saw God in everything that Abraham did. Isn't that something? Don't we want to see God in everything that we do? You know, the interesting thing about the story where Abraham sends Ishmael and Hagar away, it seems bad at the time, but God told him to. It actually turns out it was a part of God's plan. And we know that Ishmael will become a great nation and, in fact, will be the father of the descendants leading up to the Muslim faith. So even when Abraham didn't want to do something, if God told him to do it, Abraham did it. And even in that, reflected God to all those around him, whether it was his servants, his workers, the small army that he had with him, Abimelech the king. I mean, that's another thing. Abraham was a shepherd with giant flocks. I mean, not just anybody goes up to the king. He had a small army with him. It was sort of a custom of the time that these Hebrew, as they were known then, when they were out with their sheep, they would make a covenant with the city. And we'll keep our sheep out here in the pasture, and our shepherds, our armed warriors that protect the sheep, will also protect your town. And so Abraham got access through that, of course, obviously, to the king of each city where they were, and or the land that they were in. And Abimelech saw Abraham, would witness what Abraham was doing, and saw that God was in him in everything. And then finding question 9, why is the story of Abraham and Abimelech's peace treaty important to us at this point in the narrative, just following Isaac's birth? It seems like we've just went off on an angle somewhere. Why at this point in the narrative is this important? And so let's read Genesis 21, 22 through 34. So at the end there, we see that God tells Hagar it's going to be okay. And that, verse 20, God was with the lad, and he grew and lived in the wilderness, became an archer. And he and his mother took a wife from the land of Egypt, and so on. But now we come to, so Isaac's born. We have this getting Ishmael cast out of the camp, and then boom, we're this covenant with Abimelech, and Abimelech sees that God is with Abraham. Why is this in here? So let's read 22 through 34. Now it came about at that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of the army, spoke to Abraham, saying, God is with you in all that you do. Now therefore swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me or with my offspring or with my posterity, but according to the kindness that I have shown to you, you shall show to me and to the land in which you have sojourned. And Abraham said, I swear it. But Abraham complained to Abimelech because of the well of water which the servants of Abimelech had seized. And Abimelech said, I do not know who has done this thing. You did not tell me, nor did I hear of it until today. This is the first I've heard of it. In other words, I don't know what's happened. Abraham then took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a covenant. Then Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves, and Abimelech said to Abraham, what do these 7 ewe lambs mean, which you have set by themselves? And Abraham said, you shall take these 7 ewe lambs from my hand, so that it may be a witness to me that I dug this well. Therefore he called that place Beersheba, because there the two of them took an oath. So they made a covenant at Beersheba, and Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, arose and returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree at Beersheba, and there he called in the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned in the land of the Philistines for many days. And so I asked the question, why is this in here? Well, it's important because it sets the stage for Abraham and his family to live here in peace for many years. It also lays the groundwork for the events that will follow in chapter 22 when God asks Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, because he's going to be living right here. The interesting thing about Abraham is he would move to a location, but then he would settle. He would sort of invest himself in the area. He would plant trees. He wasn't hither and yon and, hurry. He invested himself in the area that he was, and his plan was to stay there for years and years. And so this is where he'll live. This is where Isaac will grow up. And this is where Isaac, God will ask Abraham next week, in our lesson next week, God will ask Abraham to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. And won't that be a lesson? So I hope you're enjoying the study. I look forward to seeing you again next week, and may God bless you.